You're listening to Deeply Curious, a podcast about our ever-evolving philosophy of life and faith and the curious pursuit of knowledge and wisdom.
I'm Cody Jensen.
And I'm Sarah Jensen.
And in this episode, we're going to be talking about the multiple intelligence theory. Essentially, we're continuing a series on emotional, mental health, but also self-awareness. So we're piggybacking on last episode where we talked about mental capacity. And if you missed that episode, or if you do not remember, just a quick refresher that the mental capacity conversation is about your margins, your specific capacities in your life, mental and real, like physical, like you have a capacity of time. All of us have the same capacity of time. We only have 24 hours,
right.
But not all of us have the same capacity for everything else.
Right.
My capacity for social interaction is higher than Sarah's capacity for social interaction. But just because I have a higher capacity for social interaction doesn't mean that I can max that out, because then I may not have margin.
Right.
And margin is the space between your load and your limits. So we talked about that and how you go into chronic overload and how you have to recognize that just because you're really good at something and you have a lot of capacity for it doesn't mean that you can just operate there at full speed and the rest of your life.
Yeah, we were, just to throw this in there on that conversation, we were watching a documentary and they were talking about, it's about climate change, but they were talking about the chronic stress of the earth and how whenever something is chronically stressed, like things are happening to it all the time, it just stops working, you know? And I just had a thought that like we can't, as humans, can't understand that about the earth because we don't understand it about ourselves.
Right.
Like we are operating generally in America, probably elsewhere, at chronic stress levels. So we don't actually even know that we're chronically stressed. Like we feel like something might be off or whatever. You're like almost always at a breaking point, you know, but we've never operated in a healthy manner to even really kind of have the wherewithal of what that means, you know? So I was just thinking about that. Like if we're operating on these such high levels, we don't actually even know that we're so unhealthy.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. You don't have the margin to even recognize that you aren't operating at 100 because you've been operating at 75 for so long, it feels like 100.
Exactly. So I think that was like most of the conversation in the last podcast is learning how to recognize where you need improvement or where you need to like cut back and all of that stuff.
So piggybacking on that conversation of mental capacity and recognizing the margins, that space between your load and your limits, just continuing on that into the multiple intelligence theory, which is a theory that is contrary to the most widely accepted theory of the past of general intelligence.
Right.
That every person has a specific general intelligence number. You could call that IQ, but it has been measured as you have one intelligence, and you are either smart or you are not smart or you're average, basically, if you were on a sliding scale. But I think that one thing that is easy to kind of wrap your mind around is we've all known people and we've all said these phrases of, oh, well, that person is book smart or that person is street smart. Somebody with an incredible amount of academic knowledge has very little common sense.
Right.
Or somebody with crazy street smarts didn't even go to school, dropped out of high school, and found success well beyond the person who got straight A's but learned no social intelligence.
Right.
So multiple intelligence theory is essentially that you are neither smart nor dumb.
Right.
You are just a person, and you may be more intelligent in this thing than you are that thing, but you can't, it's hard to measure the general intelligence of somebody who intimately and intricately knows the land and how the land works and has a naturalistic intelligence of just relating information to one's natural surroundings and is able to know the plants, know the animals, and maintain this like ecosystem of harmony and live amongst that, track animals and what it means to the different smells and the different sights and the different footprints.
Mm-hmm.
All of that is knowledge.
Right. Or like a mechanic.
Right.
Who knows the ins and outs of cars and whatever is like way smarter at that than I am. Any sort of specialized, I suppose, trade.
Right. It's like a mechanical genius.
Yeah.
But is one of those guys who, we saw a guy like this in a documentary just recently. Oh, I think it was actually, we were watching Making a Murderer.
Oh yeah, that's a great documentary. I missed it when it came out a long time ago, so I just watched it. Fascinating.
And one of the episodes that I caught, it was the Avery salvage yard and the dad who is almost incoherent in his speech.
Yeah.
But you can tell that he is a mechanical genius.
He just knows all the things about parts. And
if you bring him anything that is, non-computerized machinery.
Right.
It's like it just immediately knows how it interconnects, how it works. And
it's very impressive.
That is an incredible set of intelligence that he has, but is generally thought of as a stupid person.
Yeah.
As somebody
uneducated
who is,
owns a salvage yard.
Poor because the intelligence of which he is incredible at is no longer the intelligence needed to thrive in our economic system.
I would say is no longer the intelligence valued in our economic system.
Correct.
Yeah.
And now you can actually be really dumb and be a billionaire.
Yeah.
Maybe not a billionaire, but you can be really dumb and be a millionaire.
Yeah. Pretty easy.
And not know as much as this person that
or even
is considered low class and unintelligent.
Yeah. Or even like I think about tailors and just like people who sew. Mm-hmm. That's not like a thing that I am capable of understanding. I don't know how to like look at somebody standing in a suit and know what needs to be adjusted. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like that's a dying art.
Right. And I think that's kind of a visual intelligence.
Yes.
And that's one of the intelligences that is included in the multiple intelligence theory. And the multiple intelligence theory has a whole scientific backing. The guy has all these criteria that he uses. Each of the intelligences are called modalities, and there's all these criteria that each one has to fit within and check so many boxes before it's considered to be an official part of like we've found evidence for this in a scientific biological study, and social cognitive studies have also matched it and things like that. I think that it is mostly interesting to know the theory so that you can think about yourself differently. Mm-hmm. Before I move on, just so you know, an intelligence modality or just one of these different intelligences is it has to fit within the 8 specific criteria. We don't need to go through all of them, but it's just they do have to go through a criteria list in order to be included. And some interesting ones are like brain damage. If you get in a motorcycle accident, you hit your head and you damage your brain and you can no longer play music.
Right.
Then that's kind of evidence that you had like a specific knowledge center.
Or that you get brain damage and now you can play music.
Correct. Which is also another criteria, is the evidence of savants in an area. Mm-hmm. So a savant is somebody who is a prodigy, or, a prodigy is basically a young savant, if I understand correctly.
Like a John Mayer with guitar,
Right.
He's a savant.
So it's just somebody who unnaturally is amazing at something.
Yeah.
From a young age, or for lack of practice. Mm-hmm. So there are evidences of savants and et cetera in each of these areas. So in the multiple intelligence theory, 8 or 9, he's added a 9th that I'll mention, but it's music intelligence. So sensitivity to rhythm, pitch, tone, melody, or timbre. Mm-hmm. That's like a musical intelligence. And like our friend Josh, has a high musical intelligence. It's insane to watch somebody with musical intelligence because I have very little musical intelligence.
Yeah, he just like makes up stuff all the time. It's kind of irritating, actually.
Right. Whenever, and our brother-in-law as well, it's like sitting down at a piano or picking up a guitar and immediately
just starts playing whatever.
Can just begin playing and begin singing in a different melody and
making it up on the spot.
Knowing what note is next.
Yeah.
Knowing what sounds good, in literally 4 beats. A new note I haven't thought of yet is about to happen. I have to pick which note it is, hear it in my head, and then play it with my fingers.
And know that it's going to sound good.
Right. I'm sure people with musical intelligence are like, yeah, you're dumb. That's not how it works.
Yeah.
Another one, visual or spatial intelligence. This is something that I know that I've always been high in.
Right. As most of you have seen our apartment tour videos.
Yes. So, it's basically just high spatial judgment, the ability to see what's in the mind's eye.
Right.
And so that's just a spatial intelligence that I have. I can look at a space, and I typically know more than the average of how to make this space feel nice.
Right.
Just have spatial judgment. It's also within design and like composition, photography. It's just
right. Like I can look at something like a design or something and know that it feels off, but not really know why. But like you can look at it and give every single reason of what is off or what is on, you know? I can't do that.
So the next one is verbal or linguistic intelligence. So this is somebody who has intelligence in reading, writing, telling stories, memorization of words and dates. So that would be Sarah.
Yeah, that's me.
That is Sarah's somebody who has a definite high capacity or intelligence in the verbal.
Just words
in general. That she's can read faster than the average, can comprehend more than the average. Writing is a skill that comes naturally and enjoys.
And then, I'm good at remembering words too.
And dates.
Yeah, and dates.
This is something you come naturally in.
Yes. I've never worked at it.
Right. And the next one is logical or mathematical intelligence. So logic, abstractions, reasoning, numbers, and critical thinking. There's the whole language of math.
Yeah.
That it is easier for some people to understand the language of math than it is for other people to understand the language of math. But then there's also just abstractions and logic and critical thinking that is in that same intelligence modality.
Right, using the same parts of the brain.
Right. And I feel like both of us feel highly in that one.
I always thought it was interesting in school. My favorite subjects were English and math, which are usually it's usually you're either into English and history or science and math. But I was always English and math. And I never really understood what that meant. Maybe that's what it means. Yeah,
I think for me it was a little bit of geometry.
Yeah.
Was the math that I was drawn to.
See, I hated geometry.
And you hated it.
Yeah.
Because geometry is visual math.
So am I not a visual person?
Well,
no, I don't think
I think you've definitely grown in your visual abilities, but from a young age and growing up, you've always been somebody who's like, well, I just can't see it.
Yeah, I have to like physically see it in order for my mind to wrap around. Like I can't envision something.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Whereas I'm like constantly envisioning things.
Interesting.
So like I was always into the geometry side of math.
I loved the math algebra problems that took an entire page to solve. That was my just such a sense of accomplishment when you're done with those.
Which is insane to me.
It still makes me smile, the feeling I would get when I would finish one of those problems and it would be right. Oh, it's so satisfying.
The next intelligence is bodily or kinesthetic. So control of body, athletes, dancers, police officers, soldiers. So
you just have like a strong...
Like actual physical learning. You learn with
like if you say I'm a very hands-on learner?
I believe so. And just, but also like the professions would be like athletes,
Right. Like
dancers,
you're just physically intelligent.
right? You understand your body.
Mm-hmm.
That example, I'm not an athlete, but I have a bit higher bodily intelligence because I'm able to move parts of my bodies in ways that the average cannot move at all, or in the ways that I can. So it also, if you add a high musical sensibility, a music intelligence with a body intelligence, that's when you're going to get into dance.
Right.
Because you can feel the music.
Right.
But you can also, you have an intelligence of your body where you can control your body in a way that is art.
Right.
Obviously, athletes do this with the precise placement of their body in ways that achieve the outcome of the game.
Right.
Police officers and people who are physical, like they have actual physical labor jobs.
Right.
You have to have an intelligence of your body in order to perform those tasks, and that's why you have to go through rigorous physical testing and boot camps and all those types of things, because you have to learn how to use your body in the correct ways in order to have fast reaction times and et cetera, et cetera. Next one is interpersonal intelligence. And so interpersonal intelligence is sensitivity to others' moods, feelings, temperaments, motivations, and their ability to cooperate and to work as a part of a group.
I think I'm pretty high in that.
So I think that women are higher in interpersonal intelligence than men on average. That is just based on
just a theory.
My own personal theory that has no scientific backing for me
you
to
mean
reference.
You haven't done studies on it?
Yes. I didn't even do any internet research. But I think
it would make sense.
I think we can all pretty much say that we know for fact that
women are better
women
at this.
understand emotions better than men. So,
I think you're probably right.
Men can also be intelligent in interpersonal intelligence.
For sure.
The next one is intrapersonal intelligence. So interpersonal, which is the outward intelligence of relationships and sensitivity to others' moods. Intrapersonal is somebody who's introspective and self-reflective, have deep understanding of the self.
Yeah.
So those are two different intelligences. And we're going to come back to this.
Okay.
I want to come back to interpersonal because I think that is one of the most important things we have to understand.
Yeah.
The eighth official one, is naturalistic. And so this is knowledge of nature, nurturing and relating to one's own natural surroundings. So sensitive, ethical, and holistic understanding of the world and its complexities, like the role of humanity within the greater ecosphere.
Right.
So naturalistic intelligence are just nature lovers.
Right.
And
people who understand we are connected to the earth. Like everything we do here does leave a footprint, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. And all of the knowledge and information and intelligence that you gain from being an animal on the earth, interconnected with the greater ecosystem, and understanding your place within that ecosystem and operating within that and being sensitive to the changes of atmosphere within that.
Just
knowing,
live and breathe and knowing
the land. That's something that I have been recently more interested in, more trying to learn, just because I've never really been a nature person, but I've been feeling very, very connected to nature in the last year, and reading Native American poets and the way they talk about nature. It's like, oh, I know nothing.
Right. Well, Westerners know nothing about almost anything. So.
Right. Exactly. And the last one, before we go back to interpersonal, is there is now newer evidence that the originator of this theory is saying that we probably should consider including is a spiritual or existential intelligence. That it seems like the number of criteria needed in order for that to be an intelligence has been met, and it's good to include it, at least in the potential that it's there,
Mm-hmm.
that existential or spiritual intelligence.
Well, I have an existential crisis every day, so
Yeah.
pretty good at that.
So going back to interpersonal and intrapersonal intelligences, the reason I want to come back to this is because I don't know if this is true or not, but I have my own personal theory that in this multiple intelligence theory, that in order for you to really break through, to really grow,
Mm-hmm.
to really move past and be able to learn these other intelligences, you have to get to at least a certain point within the interpersonal intelligence and the intrapersonal intelligence.
I mean, I agree. I think if you're high in the naturalistic intelligence, then you're going to be high in the intrapersonal.
Mm-hmm.
I think they sort of go hand in hand. Same with the music and intrapersonal, because in order to write music or lyrics, you have to be very in tune with yourself.
Right.
You know, it
Right.
seems like kind of a base, a starting point for everything else.
Yeah. And so I think that if you have a growth mindset, you can understand that there are now 8 or 9 different areas of growth.
Right.
Instead of the looming, like, I just need to be smarter.
Right.
Like where you start maybe at a fixed mindset where you're like, I'm not smart. I'm not going to be able to learn, or I can't learn, or I can't change. But then maybe you move into a growth mindset and you're like, okay, I can change. I can learn things. I can become a better person.
Mm-hmm.
I think for some people, it can be overwhelming to understand that they can become smarter,
Mm-hmm.
but how do you become smarter? Like if it's just one big number, if it's just
Right.
one intelligence, like how am I moving forward in my intelligence?
Right.
I think multiple intelligence theory allows at least me to see intelligence in these different functions and factions of my brain, and understanding the importance of certain specific ones, the interpersonal and the intrapersonal being
Among the top.
among the top ones for sure.
Well, I think it's just like it categorizes things to make it into bite-sized chunks instead of like, oh God, I have to be a whole new, better person. What? You can be like, okay, well, I mean, I can take piano lessons, or I can go sit in nature, or whatever. Like it breaks it down, I feel like, and makes it a lot more manageable, because we do tend to have this idealistic thing. You know, we all do it every year. Like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be so much better.
Mm-hmm.
And you make insane deals with yourself. You know, I'm going to lose 30 pounds or whatever. Well, how are you going to lose 30? Like, it's not, it makes it so overwhelming. Whereas if you say like, well, I'm just going to walk a mile every day. Like, that's so achievable. You know what I mean?
Right.
I think that's what this multiple intelligence theory does. It like breaks things down into achievable, understandable things instead of just this really huge ethereal idea of intelligence. You can be like, okay, well, I know that I can start reading and that'll make me smarter in this area.
Mm-hmm.
Or, you know,
If you would like to know what you are most intelligent in within the multiple intelligence theory, I would say start taking note of what you always want to talk about.
yeah,
Anytime you're in a conversation with somebody, the thing that you keep bringing it back to is the thing that you are smartest in.
mm-hmm.
Because you always want to talk about what you know. You want to talk about what you feel confident in, what you feel
Right.
that you know the most in. So if you're always bringing it back to music, then you are probably somebody with a high musical intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that the one to look out for is if you are always bringing it back to interpersonal relationships.
Mm-hmm.
This is something I have learned through Cal Newport's book, Digital Minimalism. He talks about this, the brain's default mode network within the book. And essentially the brain's default mode network is, what do you think about whenever you aren't thinking?
Mm-hmm.
That was the question. Whenever you stop thinking, what do you start thinking about? Because we all know your brain doesn't like turn off
Right. It's doing its own thing, whether you're aware or not.
Right. And the moment you try to stop thinking, you're thinking about the fact that you're trying to stop thinking, and you can, it's like this whole thing. So they did these experiments. So that the scientific experiment was putting somebody in an fMRI machine, having them look at a screen, and it showing them just different images or objects, whatever they did. And as they were showing the images, they were scanning the brain to see which parts of the brain lit up. But that wasn't the actual experiment. The actual experiment was telling them, okay, we're going to take a 10-minute break, and then scanning them while they were resting.
Right.
And they found that the parts of the brain that light up when you stop thinking are the parts of the brain associated with your interpersonal relationships, with your social world. You start thinking about your social life. One of the quotes from the book was, "The brain did not evolve over millions of years to spend its free time practicing something irrelevant to our lives."
Right.
So what does that mean? Why do we start thinking about our social life when we stop thinking? And if interpersonal relationships is one of the intelligences, it also points to that it is something that is very important.
Right.
So the reason it's important within an evolutionary mindset, and let's just take our humanity out of it and just talk about us as animals, we can survive better if we cooperate. So if we think about our social life and how we accidentally snub somebody at the watering hole, we can think about that, go apologize and make amends, or we can think about that somebody snubbed us and go kill them, or whatever, the animal world, dictates that happens through whatever knowledge we happen to have at that particular time in our history.
Right.
The actions are going to be different. So literally, when you stop thinking, you start thinking about your social life. And if there are toxic relationships in your social life, then those are the things you begin to think about, because your mind is trying to process how to maintain cooperation within your tribe, within your group of other humans that you do life with, which we have evolved to believe that it is life or death. It has become very important for humans to cooperate with one another.
Right.
And because of that, our brain's default mode network, the thing that we think about upon not thinking, is our social life. If we do not hold the intelligence in our social life, then we can never move past that particular moment, that particular toxic relationship.
Right.
And so knowing the multiple intelligence theory, that interpersonal is an intelligence that you can grow in, because we have a growth mindset. And we know that we have a mental capacity, and each of us have a social capacity. We have a certain specific capacity for how much we can be social creatures. I have my own theory that if we are surrounded by toxic or unhealed relationships, our brains are literally hardwired to think about our social lives. So when we remove distractions, we immediately start thinking about those relationships, and we won't stop thinking about them until some form of internal or external action is taken. If all our mental capacity is taken up by those thoughts and the distractions we use from those thoughts to get away from those thoughts, then we can't progress in our emotional and other intelligences. So just like an instrument or football or healthcare, you have to practice emotional intelligence to get better. If you want to get better at an instrument, you have to practice to get better. If you want to get better at football, you have to practice to get better. As you get better, you will increase your mental capacity to use freely as you wish. So the more interpersonal intelligences you gain, and or intrapersonal intelligence you gain, because you have to take some sort of internal or external action when it comes to relationships. If you every time you try to turn your brain off, if you start thinking about a specific relationship, that is not going to go away until you take an external or internal action. And so you have to gain the emotional intelligence of others and yourself in order to move past that. You may not have to go to that person, make amends, and make the relationship right. That may not be possible because ultimately you're only responsible for yourself and you can't be responsible for their actions.
Right.
But it would be amazing if you had the interpersonal relationship skills and intelligence to go to that person, heal the relationship, and do that. But maybe you don't have those skills, maybe they don't have those skills, and it actually takes an internal action.
Right.
And that internal action is being introspective, being self-reflective, sitting down and thinking about that thing that you literally won't stop thinking about.
Right. Well, and also it's not going to maybe even be something that just goes away after you think about it. It'll be something maybe that pops up all the time that you have to like train yourself on how to deal with, triggers and stuff. That's basically what I'm talking about. Like things that, sometimes you will be getting over or healing or whatever from something for your whole life. You know what I mean? But that's the value of being introspective, is first recognizing those patterns or triggers or whatever, and then recognizing how you typically cope. And if you don't like how you typically cope, learning new coping skills, that's intrapersonal.
Exactly. And once you're able to at least do that, it may not be healed, it may not be fixed, it may not be something that you moved past, but you were at least had enough intra or interpersonal intelligence to recognize it and move on.
Right.
At least move on into other thoughts.
Right.
Because if we all have a certain mental capacity, we can only have so many thoughts per day. Just like we only have 24 hours per day. If all of your thought capacity is taken up by these interpersonal relationships, then how are you going to think about yourself and heal yourself and have introspection? And if you don't have introspection, you're going to get caught in those interpersonal relationships.
Right.
And I have noticed this as somebody, I'm in my early 30s now, and as somebody who's lived through their 20s, I would say I've become sick of and have recognized that 20-year-olds, at least in the generation that I grew up in the environment that I grew up in, pretty much exclusively are talking about interpersonal relationships when they get together and talk. It's not getting together and talking about music or visual or verbal or logic or, bodily intelligence or philosophy. It's talking about who's shit talking who. And or somebody asked me this question and this is the advice I gave them, or somebody is going through this thing and this is what is happening with that and this is what I think about it. What do you think about it? All of this mental capacity that is being used on things that used to matter because it used to be imperative to our survival.
Right.
That we maintained social order and cooperation with others. I'm not advocating for individualism and we no longer cooperate with others.
Right.
It's just that our brain's default mode network makes us feel as though we have to think about, like we are thinking about these things, and we are thinking about these things because our brain defaults to thinking about them. And if it's toxic, if it's negative, if it needs healing, then it's always coming back to our brain.
Right.
We're always talking about it. It is weighing on us. It's taking our mental capacity. It is creating a burnout limit where we have to take those thoughts out of our head and talk about them with someone else who is also having their own interpersonal relationship thoughts. They listen to yours. You listen to theirs. You bitch and complain about it. And then you go home and nothing changed.
Well, yes. I mean, that does, I feel like, leave little room for the relief you can feel in just saying something. Like sometimes you just need to get it off your chest. I'm not saying you should always need to get it off your chest, but there is something very
cathartic.
Yeah, cathartic about that.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, I think maybe it's a male-female dynamic difference.
Maybe.
But it's also, I think it just, potentially just the difference between our personalities.
Yeah.
Go on.
No, I mean, I think that it's probably just you.
Which, through that being me, that is why I've come to this theory.
Right.
That if you get past all of this interpersonal garbage and heal the relationships by gaining interpersonal intelligence, understanding and being sensitive to other people's moods, feelings, temperaments, motivations, and their ability to cooperate and work as a part of a group, then you can actually bring healing in those relationships. And if you had the ability to quit thinking about everyone else and what they think about you and how it's going to affect you and them if you say or do not say, go, do not go, all of those things, it frees you up to gain intelligence in anything else you want because you have the capacity to do so.
Right.
I know that sounds a little bit hateful. I don't mean to take a hateful tone. It's just kind of naturally how it comes out. I genuinely mean that lovingly, that I've been there. I know what it's like to have a relationship stealing all of my mental capacity.
Right. I think the problem is how, or at least for me, is how to not let relationships steal all your mental capacity when it's clear that there's only one of you interested in.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like when the other person isn't healthy or isn't capable of mending anything or whatever it is, that's when it just like sits in my brain and I can't stop thinking about it,
Right.
Like I'm not skilled enough yet to know how to just like move on or whatever when I know somebody has some sort of feelings toward me that I don't understand. Like, you know what I mean?
Right.
But they won't talk to me about it. Like, I don't really know how to operate.
Right. So, I know that's a rhetorical question, but I will use your own words against you, essentially.
Okay.
That you can't control other people.
Right.
And so you can't be responsible for how other people respond.
Right.
If you have done your due diligence.
Right. Which I have gotten better at.
The relationship?
But because I was forced to get better at. Like somebody made me get better at it,
Yeah, including me.
Anyways, I just like it's more so I guess what I'm saying is I don't feel like I'm sitting here constantly thinking about my relationships if they're positive.
Right.
But like if there's somebody who I feel like is refusing to understand me, then that's when I can't stop thinking about it.
Right.
Which I guess is the point of what it's saying, that we have this innate need to live in harmony. But
basically what you said is that's my part of my theory, is that if we are surrounded by toxic or unhealed relationships,
right,
that's what we keep coming back to. Our brain keeps thinking about it, trying to figure out how to fix it. Because ultimately, we want to fix it, but there's so many things you could talk about there, just like pride getting in the way, selfishness getting in the way,
right. Other people's coping skills,
right?
What level they're at,
your own lack of emotional intelligence getting in the way, your lack of interpersonal relationship intelligence getting in the way. To put it shortly, the lack of humbleness gets in the way.
Right.
That in any case, if you humbly go to them and not trying to fix them, trying to understand them, or humble yourself in you don't need to fix it, go inside of your introspective self and just allow yourself to process out of it. Obviously, these are all very easy said, hard to do.
Right.
Which is why I'm recording this podcast. Because I think that interpersonal and intrapersonal intelligence is crucial for anyone to make it in the next step of their journey of becoming.
Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, you can't really progress if your relationships are always toxic. You can't really progress if you hate yourself or whatever. You know what I mean? Like that you're always going to be held back by those two things. If you don't find a way to live in harmony with those two things, whether that is making amends with people or just learning how to move on if there isn't the ability to make amends or whatever, but it will keep you in the place you are currently at, no matter what you do in any other area of your life.
Which brings to mind another theory that we've grown up in, especially in the church. It's not a Christian thing, but you will become the people you surround yourself with. Show me your 5 closest friends and I'll show you your future. Mm-hmm. These relationships lead you to becoming who you're going to become. Mm-hmm. If those relationships are toxic and unhealed, you're going to be a toxic and unhealed person.
Right.
Unless you take the hard, narrow path of gaining intrapersonal intelligence, mm-hmm. where you do your due diligence to find a deep understanding of self, and you're able to retreat from those people, find clarity and find answers, then bring that to the group and change it from, that aspect, which is essentially what we all have to do with our family. Yeah. Because we can't just say, I'm getting new friends.
Right.
And then others, I have no shame in that I've had friends, groups in the past that were leading me to becoming somebody I didn't want to become because of whatever reasons, including toxic relationships, that it's okay to just remove myself from it.
For sure.
I have changed. I have become a different person. I now see this group of people as zoomed out, larger than my interaction, and see that the interaction was taking me to a place that I don't want to be emotionally, because in that place I can't freely be myself. And if I can't freely be myself, then I can't truly operate within the music, visual, verbal, logical, interpersonal, naturalistic, and existential intelligence that I would like to operate in, that I would like to gain knowledge in all of the intelligences. Mm-hmm. But I can't, because I'm constantly in need of working out frivolous relationship thing. So if you wanted to know my theory on that, there it was.
Basically, he'll drop you.
I drop it like it's hot.
No, but I do think there's something to be said for that, which I think you learn as you get older. I think I was maybe like 27 when I really understood that I don't have time for relationships that aren't 50-50. You know what I mean? Like, if you're not going to work on this as much as I am, then I don't feel bad, like, not being close to you. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, I think that's one of the things for me is if I feel like there is equal effort, that's very important to me. So that's why I have 2 friends. Because not a lot of people think equal effort is, and it's not as simple as that. I mean, obviously there's give and take. Some people are gonna, like, I will give more to a relationship than the other person in certain seasons or whatever, but like there's give and take. But generally speaking, I just don't feel like I need to hold on to relationships that aren't trying to hold on to me. Yeah. I'm like, yeah, see ya, bye. Like, it doesn't.
Basically, at the end of a friend career, how many years that you gave it, if you feel yourself always giving all of your capacity away because they are asking, demanding, or taking all of that capacity from you,
right,
and it has never changed, then
at some point, you just have to be honest, and it doesn't make any of it bad or whatever. Because I think sometimes we'd be like, oh, they're such a bad person. Mm-hmm. Like, no, they just don't have the capacity that you do,
right,
or understand it,
right, and or neither you or the person walking away maybe had the interpersonal intelligence to be able to communicate what they were feeling in a manner of which you were able to understand, and it was all an emotional blowout.
Right.
Because nobody knew how to say what they were feeling.
Right, which is
why
what happens.
Emotional intelligence is so important.
Right.
Because you have to understand your emotions in order to verbalize your emotions in your interpersonal relationships, so that when they feel the sensitivity to your mood, you're able to explain or communicate what your mood is. Even if it's not to them, you can communicate it to yourself and say, I feel angry. I should step outside for a bit and then come back.
Right.
And whenever you know that, then you don't get angry in the room and cause a bunch of conflict that actually had nothing to do with anyone other than you forgot to eat.
Right, exactly. Or like, I read this thing recently that was basically saying like, if you, like in the moment, you know, if you could realize how much of most people's reaction to you is just them projecting, then you would take nothing personally, which is like way easier said than done, because it doesn't matter if it's projection, it still hurts a little bit, you know. But like, that is the truth. Like, we're all just kind of projecting our experience. You know what I mean? It's like half the time, at least, it's nothing personal.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really it. That's my theory, you know, based on all of these things that I've learned of just mental capacity, emotional intelligence, multiple intelligence theory, the brain's default mode network. You become who you hang out with. Like, toxic relationships just steal all of your mental capacity and to where you can't move on and grow in areas of which you want to grow, and or just move on and live your life.
Yeah, I think also I'm reading The Body Keeps the Score right now, which is a really fascinating book, but just the idea that the body and the brain are connected, and our body holds trauma even if you don't realize it, and like the way you trigger has everything to do with like what happened to you as a kid, and it's not necessarily like one big traumatic event. He talks about it in the book, but anyways, I think like also that's one thing that I'm learning right now that I find really fascinating, is just how interconnected we are to everything else, and we don't even realize it. I think it goes along with this.
Yeah. So throw that into the fishbowl of ideas.
Yeah.
That develop who we are, I guess. I mean, that's how ideas are formed, is you input a bunch of stuff, your brain shakes it around.
Files it away, however it files.
However it does it. And then it comes out in this new thing, even if it's just new for you.
Yep.
So really my argument is gain intelligence.
Yeah.
And I now have a new way to talk about that I think knowledge is power. It's not knowing that is important. It is understanding that we don't know.
Right.
That is the most important. My fight isn't so much for intelligence as it is against ignorance. Because we will never gain enough intelligence. We will never know what is able to be known.
Right.
But ignorance is what keeps us from moving forward. And ultimately, I believe, for Cody, living on the edge of what is possible is the only way to make sure that life is worth dying for.
There you go.
And so I leave you in peace, my friends, to go gain some intelligence, heal some relationships, figure out what are you most intelligent in. You got some musical intelligence, visual, verbal, logistical or mathematical, logical, I guess, bodily, kinesthetic. I like saying that word, kinesthetic, interpersonal, intrapersonal, naturalistic, existential. And which ones do you know nothing about, nothing in, and that you could learn a little bit, or, just because you don't know anything in music doesn't mean that you have to go learn an instrument.
Right.
But music is incredibly important. If you listen to music,
I would argue the most important.
Sarah would argue that.
I would die for that statement.
But this is my argument for why interpersonal is the most important. We could probably do another podcast about why Sarah thinks music is the most important.
I think music teaches you everything else about life that you need to know.
If you truly listen.
That's what I'm saying.
So you have to gain knowledge in how to listen to music. How to become music.
I suppose that's true.
One thing that I haven't learned is how to end the podcast.
That is also true.
So this is how we're going to end it. Bye.